Hey everyone, and welcome back to Flutter from scratch. If you're starting out with Flutter, no doubt you're already learning about what widgets you can use in your application, what state management you should choose, and so on and so forth. If you're anything like me, you probably want to go ahead and get straight into the cool stuff, like making beautiful apps that are fun to use. But there's a chance that in doing this, you could actually skip past some of the simpler concepts in the language that Flutter uses, which is Dart. Understanding how some of these basic concepts work within Dart will make you a better Flutter developer. As well as that, if you learn about some of these basic concepts, it also means that you'll always reach for the right tool. That's why today we're kicking off this series by talking about collections. Before coming to Flutter, you likely use collections in other languages, such as dictionaries, arrays, or lists. Really, they're part of every language, so let's see how they fit into Dart. Well, today we'll be talking about three different types of collections. First, we have lists, second, we have maps, and finally, we'll talk about sets. Lists within Dart operate largely the same as they do in any other language. What you should know though is that while some languages may have lists and arrays, Dart only has lists. Creating a list is easy. You set up your variable, have your values separated by commas, and then you have your values inside. If you declare a list that contains strings or numbers, then Dart will work out what implicit type that list should be. If you put values in a list of different types, then Dart will assign the value to the list of the lowest common denominator between the objects in the list. So if you just put integers in a list, then your list will be of type integer. If you put integers and doubles, then your list will be of type num, because that's the type that both integer and double have in common. But then, if you have a list with strings, integers, doubles, and booleans in it, then it will just be of type object, because that's the lowest common denominator between those types. Of course, just because you can do that doesn't mean you should. I mean, I can't think of a valid reason why you'd like to have a list with numbers, strings, and booleans in it, and it probably would just create a bit of a mess. So you can do it, but you probably shouldn't. Stick to keeping one type in your lists. One really cool thing about lists is the ability to conditionally include elements in them at runtime. In Flutter, you'll normally use this kind of functionality to conditionally include or exclude elements from rendering in your columns or your list views, depending on the state of your app. It's just some really helpful syntactic sugar to make it easy to work with lists within your app. Another really cool thing about lists is the ability to use the spread operator. This means that when you're creating a new list, you can easily include values from another list in the list that you're creating. And you can do this simply by calling that other list and prefixing it with 3 dots. Again, this really comes in handy when creating list views or columns or really any widget that has a children parameter. So let's have a look at how we can use these conditional inclusions and spread operator within list views or columns in our app. So what I have here is a widget, which is really simple. It just has a scaffold and an app bar, and our app just looks like this. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll include a body, and in the body we'll choose a column and it'll specify our children. Then what we'll do is we'll create some booleans up here. So I'll call it final include cat equals false, final include dog equals true. And because that column here just takes a simple list, we can say that we'd like to have a text item, elephant, and horse, for instance. And if I save that, we can see that these items come up in the column as we'd expect. But within the list, I can actually conditionally include what I'd like to include in this list at the same time as I'm declaring it, which is pretty cool. What that means is I can say if includes cat, then text cat. If include dog, then text dog. So if we come back to our column, we can see now we have elephant, horse, and dog. And that's because the include cat variable is initialized to false, and the include dog variable is initialized to true. If I change this around, made that true, and made that false, and saved it, we could see it would update accordingly. The next thing we'll look at here will be how the spread operator works. So if I go ahead and create a variable and call it other animals, and I have a list, and I call it gecko, albatross, pony, and then I come back down to my list. If I'd like to include these animals in the list as well, I can come in here and just go 3 dots and then go other animals. Now because these are strings and it's expecting a widget, we can actually map all of these into just a text widget. And if I save that and come back to our app, we can see they're included within the column. Practically, the way that I use this within my apps is I'll normally have a button up the top of my column which will do something, like maybe add animal or something like this. And then underneath it, I'd like to show the individual animals. So I can go other animals and then map them to a particular widget that we would like. And if I save that, I can see that our column begins with the button and then ends with all the animals in that list. You can use the spread operator as many times as you would like within that, potentially pulling in information from multiple lists to build out the children for your column, as we can see here. So now we're on to our second topic, which is maps. Personally, I found maps very difficult to work with when I first came to Flutter. A large part of this is because I'd simply never heard of a map data type before, and I always wanted to shuck them out into the list equivalent and just treat them like lists. So first of all, maps are just a key value store. In other languages, they might use dictionaries for the same functionality. And it's true, Flutter does let you call values.toList on a map if all you want is the values from that map. But most of the time, this really isn't what you want to do. Normally, data is in a map because it has a unique key, and then it has some data associated to that key in the value field. If you just call toList on that map, then you actually cut out all the keys and you're left with just the values from that map, which is not what you want to do. Instead, if we just realize that a map is just a key value store and deal with them appropriately, then it will be a lot easier for us. Creating a map is as easy as starting out with a curly bracket and then specifying what your key and value is separated by a colon. Now, it's important here that each key within this collection is unique. Now, Dart won't actually stop you from specifying a duplicate key in your map, but if you set the same key again later on in your map, it'll actually overwrite the first value, and you'll score a compiler warning within your IDE. The third and final collection type we'll talk about will be sets. Sets are almost like a map, but they only have the key. They can only contain unique items. To create a set, specify what you'd like to call your variable, and then just start with a curly bracket, and separate each value with a comma. Again, within a set, each item has to be unique, and if you have duplicates, then they'll simply be ignored. Personally, I actually use this forced uniqueness of maps to get a distinct value of my lists, for when I have a list of strings, but I'd only like to get the distinct values. To deduplicate all the items in that list, I just call toSet on it. This in turn returns a distinct set with only the unique items in it. If you'd ever like to create an empty list, map, or set within Dart, you can do so by specifying the type of what you would like and then the appropriate braces. For a list, it's the type of the list followed by square brackets. For a map, it's 2 type values separated by a comma for what type we'd like our key to be and what type we'd like our value to be, followed by square brackets. And then finally, for a set, it's the type we would like followed by a curly bracket. So hopefully you've found this to be an easy to understand explanation of how list, maps, and sets work within Dart, and you can apply this knowledge to your apps. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more content like this. And if you really enjoyed the video and you'd like to offset my costs, you can buy me a coffee in the link below. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy working with collections in Dart and Flutter.